I am thrilled to be here. And more than importantly, when Kay asked me to help find a keynote for today, and we were racking our brains, and we thought, how can we find the perfect fit? And when we found Joanna, she's passionate about safety and transportation. And so I was thrilled that she would consider being our keynote today. So I'm thrilled to be able to introduce Joanna McFarland. She is the CEO, president, and co-founder of HopSkipDrive. Joanna has an MBA from Stanford University and a BS from Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. But more importantly, she is the mom of 2 boys, 8 and 11. She has had this company for the last almost 5 years, and she is just as passionate about safety as we are. So I think it's a great fit to have, her topic is the courage to innovate, and I think that's really going to be a great fit for all of us to hear today. So Joanna, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm going to try to live up to everything that Lisa just said, and I'm going to try to live up to the great start that Alyssa gave us and the energy in the room. I am so honored to be invited to speak to a group of leaders who care so passionately about safety and who understand that safety is not a static concept, because things are always changing and we always have to adapt safety to those changes. Technology is evolving, vehicles on the road are changing and adapting, environments are changing. There's this whole thing called scooters, which can be terrifying. And it's, our safety innovations have to keep pace with that. And it's something that we need to embrace, not fear. And I'm excited to share ideas about how to approach changes in safety innovation and to share my own journey to create a company that really strives to encompass safety in everything that we do and really tries to redefine safety using the latest technology to redefine how we think about safely transporting our kids. So I hope to inspire you. At a minimum, I hope not to bore you. And I hope to take a lot of topics, Kay mentioned car seats. We're gonna talk a lot about car seats today. I assume you all know a whole lot more about the topics that I'm about to talk about because I've been in this for 5 years and you all are leaders in this field and experts in the field. But I'm hoping to think about some of the innovations that have happened over the last 50 years in a slightly different way and how the courage to innovate on those ideas came to be. So when I was growing up, this was my seatbelt and my car seat, right? It was my mom who would put her arm out as I sat next to her on the bench seat of her car. And when I got older, I was lucky enough to sit in the way back of the station wagon with all the other kids jumping around and jostling around because this was the 70s. There were no safety seatbelts. There were no car seats. That's just, how it was. But the seatbelts and car seats had been around for years and had been invented years before this, but they were not widely adopted. I mean, as many of you know, seatbelt laws didn't even exist in the US until 1985, and that was the first year that car seat laws actually became into existence in every state in the US. And so there was the initial innovation, but it took courage and perseverance to actually get to widespread adoption and actually get to legislation and regulation for these items. Both the car seat and the child seat are massive innovations in safety that have led to millions of saved lives. Nobody would argue about that. But when they were first introduced, there was fear, there was uncertainty, there was mass beliefs that these things cause more harm than good. And it took a lot to get to that mass adoption. And it really takes courage and innovation for everybody to get there. And oftentimes, innovation comes from very unlikely places. The original car seats were not about safety at all. They were about convenience. They were designed to give kids something to do in a vehicle and really to lift them up so that they could see out the window. But finally, in 1958, a man in Denver had a problem that the current car seat solutions couldn't solve. And his problem actually involved safety, and that's when innovation happened. So Len Rivkin had a problem when his son Bart went flying from the back seat of the family car when they were struck from behind during a family outing. And Bart, who may have been in one of the seats I showed you before, if he was in a seat at all, landed on the front floor of the car looking up at his mom on her feet. And so Len thought, there has to be a better way. There has to be a solution to this. This is not safe, and my need right now is safety. What I care about is safety. And Len was a civil engineer, and so when he couldn't find a market-based solution to his problem, he created one. He had the courage to say, this isn't good enough for me, and he created one. And in 1962, he developed and patented a design for an iron frame booster seat with a safety buckle. And it was the first one that was actually safe to use with bucket seats, which were the rage at the time. And it was really one of the first car seats with a buckle and a safety belt, a restraint. That same year in England, Jean Ames developed a rear-facing car seat with a Y buckle, which was really one of the first of its kind, and was the genesis of the designs that we see today with the 5-point harness. So both of these men took what had been originally designed for convenience and for not having your toddler distract you while you were driving, and turned that into safety, and really designed from the viewpoint of safety. And then from that point forward, that became the primary purpose of a car seat. And here's an example of one of the first rear-facing car seats. Now, this seat belt, another massive innovation in safety, also originally came from a need not for safety, but really as a way to handle the jostling and bouncing of horse-drawn carriages, and then originally, the first automobiles. They were like this, right? And so seatbelts were not about safety, it was really about having a slightly smoother ride. But again, in the early 30s, doctors started using them and inventing their own because they recognized that this was safe. And they were encouraging friends and family to do that as well, but they were still not widely adopted. In one of my favorite examples, I'm going to argue that this was a huge push of corporate social responsibility. But in 1958, Niels Bohlin of Volvo developed the first 3-point belt. And it came from safety, but he recognized that it came from convenience. You needed to be able to do it very easily with one hand. And so he invented this, he patented and invented the 3-point belt, and Volvo immediately realized the safety implications of this. There were already some lap belts that were starting to be standard in cars, but Volvo immediately saw the importance of this and gave the design away for free to other car manufacturers. That took massive courage. They could have kept it for themselves, they could have profited off of that, but they knew that safety was of utmost importance, and they gave it away. And I think that is just one of the best examples of corporate social responsibility and courage that I've seen. So again, seatbelts started to become widely recognized as a safety feature. They started to become standard in cars in the late 60s, but there was so much misinformation, and people were scared. There were protests about seatbelt laws. I was looking at some videos from New Hampshire about people literally protesting, don't take away my freedom, and why would you possibly be a nanny state and make me wear a seatbelt? And people thought that it was safer to be thrown from a car. They literally said, I would much rather fly out of a car. I think that's a lot safer than being trapped in this thing that I can't get out of in an accident. And so it took, again, more than 20 years. It took until the mid-90s to get all states to pass seatbelt laws. So there's the original innovation and the courage to see a need that is not available in the market, and then to have the courage to actually create that need. And then there's the ongoing commitment and perseverance that it takes to get that innovation widely adopted and legislated or regulated as it needs to be. And so when I research stories like these, I often think about the people behind the innovation. What was it that made Len Rivkin say, this isn't good enough for me, and I'm going to go out and do this myself? What drove Niels Bohlin to really pursue that 3-point restraint? Even as many people around him scoffed that that was needed or that was even a safe thing. What made him keep going when everyone around them said they were crazy? And I think it's really It's courage, right? To truly innovate, it takes conviction. It takes conviction about that need. You have to have conviction that that need is so important that even if it doesn't exist, you have to create it yourself. And then once you have that conviction, it takes courage to actually go out and do it. It involves risk. You're risking your reputation. You're risking putting yourself out there and being open to failure and open to vulnerability. And so you have to have both to make that happen. So like the seatbelt and the car seat, we created HopSkipDrive to address a deeply felt personal need that pushed the envelope on advancing safety for driving kids. And I often imagine that our story around creating HopSkipDrive is a little bit of what Len Rivkin or Niels Boland might also have experienced. So for me, it started with guilt. I was feeling very guilty that I had to tell my son Jackson that he couldn't do karate because it was at 3 o'clock on Thursdays, and I was a full-time working mom, and I had no way of getting him there. And, my husband worked, both of our kids were in school. I didn't need a nanny. I couldn't afford a nanny. I literally just needed to get him to karate. And look at how cute he is with karate. Like, somebody had to invent a company to get that kid to karate. And apparently it was gonna be me. So at a child's birthday party, all the moms were standing around talking about their latest mom challenges, right, as moms do at birthday parties. And this particular week, the challenge was transportation. And everybody had some version of the transportation story. There was the mom who had just taken a job on the west side of Los Angeles. I live on the east side of Los Angeles. And for those of you who know Los Angeles, that means you are stuck in a car for a long time every single day. And she was really freaked out about how she was going to get home to pick her kids up on time. There was the mom who had just found out her kids got into this great magnet school, and she was so excited about it. She had no idea how she was going to get them there. There was the mom who had 2 kids, and one was starting soccer while the other one had to be picked up from dance at the exact same time. And she was really struggling, figuring out, every mom had this portion of their brain dedicated to figuring out the transportation logistics of their family and how to get everyone where they needed to go when everyone needed to be in multiple places at once. And this is, every parent that I talk to faced this challenge in some way. And, 2/3 of working parents say that having to drive their kids somewhere disrupts their job on a regular basis. 42% say that they even feel that they've put their jobs at risk to meet their kids' transportation needs. And we did a survey about a year and a half ago where a lot of families said that managing this issue, thinking about this issue, coordinating transportation, took up about 20 hours a week. It's a part-time job just to manage the family logistics. And this is a huge problem for the 35 million families in the US, and there wasn't a workable solution out there. When I looked, just like Len Rivkin looked, I couldn't find a solution. It's really hard to find a babysitter for 30 minutes a day consistently. And to find that babysitter that's available at 2:30 on Monday and 4 o'clock on Wednesday and 5:30 on Friday, it's really hard. So you end up with a full-time nanny that a lot of people can't afford. Uber and Lyft are not appropriate for under 18, and per their terms of service are not available for unaccompanied minors. And so we realized that a solution did not exist. And at first, I had zero intention of creating one. I had a good job, I had a steady job, it paid our mortgage, it paid preschool tuition. I was, old by entrepreneur standards. I didn't look like your typical entrepreneur. I didn't wear hoodies. I wasn't, a 22-year-old college dropout. And so, when I thought of what an entrepreneur starting a company looks like, this is what I thought. And I was like, I don't look like that. And I have to get my kids to school every day. And so I couldn't do this. But as I talked to more and more families, I became more and more obsessed with this idea. And it consumed me. It was that conviction around the innovation. I like to say it literally would not leave me alone. I thought about this morning, noon, and night. I was not doing really well at that steady job that I had because I was spending all my time at that steady job thinking about this. And it came to the point where I simply had no choice but to start this company. And I imagine that that's what Len Rivkin felt as he thought about, having no choice but to create something and design something to protect his son. But From the get-go, it had to be about safety. This was about getting our own kids where they needed to go. And we designed the service for our own kids. For me, the burning question that we designed everything around was, what would it take for me to put Jackson or Sam in a HopSkipDrive? And so we thought about every aspect of the ride, from what happened before the ride, who were the drivers that we wanted to be on this platform driving kids, what happens during the ride, what kind of safety features are there, and how do we design a behind-the-scenes safety program to make sure that every ride is delivered safely and with excellence. And so before the ride, we thought about driver vetting. And we knew that for us, it was very important to have caregivers who had childcare experience, who were used to working with kids, who would have the judgment when they showed up at the soccer field and the coach wasn't there, not to leave, but to contact the parent, contact our support team, and figure out what to do. And whether it's wait for the soccer coach or, whoops, soccer got canceled today, we need to now take this child somewhere else. But that was very important to us. So we call our drivers care drivers because they are really caregivers first and drivers second. We knew that fingerprinting was important and was paramount, right? If you are a secretary in an office building, you don't get fingerprinted. If you're a secretary in a school, you get fingerprinted. It just is what it is, and it's different when you're talking about kids. And so we knew that that was important. We wanted to make sure that we could monitor driving records, but not just statically in the past. We wanted to make sure we could be part of the pull notice programs and the ongoing programs so that we could monitor what was happening next week and next month and make sure that drivers weren't getting tickets or rolling stop signs or whatever. And then through the technology, we created a service that would allow parents to monitor rides in progress and would get notifications, Jackson has been picked up, Jackson's on the way, Jackson has been dropped off. But we also knew that this wasn't enough, right? We were creating this service because we were busy. And so if I'm in a meeting, my monitoring the ride isn't necessarily going to be enough, right? I'm not going to be able to pay full attention and notice that, the driver hasn't left the pickup. Is something wrong? Can she not find Jackson? What's going on? And so we built a proprietary system and a dedicated safe ride support team. And we think of them as air traffic control, but our safe ride support team is also monitoring rides live and in real time to make sure that everything is going okay. And they have the ability to jump in and assist a care driver or a parent, or if a child is old enough and has a phone and the parent has chosen to give us that phone, we can connect with them if necessary. And we built that technology in such a way to work with our team, our safe ride support team, so that it can get smarter with every ride. So we can get smarter about, hey, you know what? This school pickup line is super congested. And so we want to make sure that when we book rides at that school or when a parent books a ride at that school, we make sure to make sure that they set the ride for 5 minutes before when they really mean it, because that care driver is going to be sitting in a really long line. So the system learns, and we learn things like that. We also wanted to make sure that we had software that could monitor driving behavior, right? And so, distracted driving is one of the biggest causes of accidents in the US. I think 1 in 4 accidents happen because of a texting while driving situation. And so it was imperative for us that our software could actually, because our software is app-based, it can actually detect cell phone usage, and it can detect it uses the accelerometer to detect swerving or hard braking or things like that. So every care driver, every ride gets a safety score so that we can make sure that our care drivers are really out there being safe. So when we first started this, many people, most people thought we were crazy. You're going to create a company that puts kids in strangers' cars? That's going to go really well. Good luck with that. And I like to say it is not putting kids in strangers' cars, it's putting kids in cars with highly vetted caregivers. But people thought we were crazy. People thought this would never work. I imagine people thought, a lot like there was thoughts about seatbelts being not safe and seatbelts being, something that isn't inhibiting you. People thought we were nuts. And we hit roadblocks at every turn. We hit roadblocks getting insurance. Right? Try finding an insurer that will cover rideshare and then say, oh yeah, and by the way, it's kids. They thought we were crazy. It took us, 6 months to find an insurance provider that was willing to work with us. I'm happy to say that over the last 4 years, we have continued to reduce our insurance rates over 40% one year and 20% the next year because our drivers are safe. And it's because of all of the features that we put into the ride. But we had to prove that out. People thought we were crazy. It was hard for us to get the right permits. People didn't know what to do with this. At the time, Uber and Lyft were fighting every regulatory fight imaginable because that's what they do. And we were just coming along saying, we want to partner with you and we want to work with you and we want to explain what we were doing. And the PC said, whoa, what is this kids thing? What is this? And so we learned we had to partner, we had to collaborate, we had to sit down and explain and educate and talk about how we were different and why we were different. We hit roadblocks in getting fundraising. We were first-time founders. We were female founders. We weren't in San Francisco. We didn't look like Mark Zuckerberg. But we had that conviction. We had that courage. For me, there was no way that this was not going to happen. And when, for every 1,000 no's we heard, and there were thousands and thousands of no's, we kept going and we persevered and we found creative ways to get to yes. And we saw adoption. Parents wanted a solution they could trust. And we have now helped tens of thousands of families get their kids where they need to go. And in addition to that, schools needed a solution that they could trust too. There are all kinds of challenges that school transportation leaders are facing in terms of, trends in education like school choice. That wreaks havoc on a fixed route bus model. They're facing severe driver shortages. They're facing huge increases in the number of individual kids that need to be transported. Homeless youth, foster youth, things that don't make sense for a big school bus, a 72-passenger school bus to carry. And so I'm now proud to say that we partner with over 170 schools and districts and 14 counties across the country, providing safe, dependable transportation for some of our most vulnerable youth. I talked a little bit about when we got our permit, but those who are safety leaders and who are regulating safety and making school transportation law, they had never seen anything like HopSkipDrive before. What is this? This doesn't look like the way we've always done it. This doesn't look like business as usual. They were used to school bus drivers and yellow buses and safety rules associated with the big yellow bus. And so they didn't know what to make of this solution that takes a whole new approach to safety and uses the latest advances in technology to provide rides specifically designed for kids with visibility into the ride every step of the way. And so it can take a lot of education and a lot of communication and some courage to help these safety leaders understand how we are redefining the future of safety. But that's okay, because it took a lot of education and a lot of communication and a lot of courage to get widespread adoption for the initial standards for car seats and for seatbelts too. Innovations that are game-changing for safety, by definition, don't look like anything that came before them. It isn't business as usual. It isn't this is how we've always done things. And oftentimes, when an innovation first appears on the scene, most people don't recognize it for what it is. So it takes time. It takes that communication and that education. Today, nobody would argue with the fact that seatbelts have saved millions of lives. But those advancements were not an overnight change. And so it's not just the courage for the innovator. It takes courage and risk for those who are safety leaders to be open to that innovation, to seek to understand. And we can and should think about how to use technology and data to make our roads safer, because our roads and the vehicles that are driving on them are changing. And so our approach to safety has to change too. We've talked about it a little bit, but today our roads have multiple modes of transit: cars, bikes, motorcycles, scooters, whether we like them or not. And at some point, we will have truly autonomous vehicles, which is great because we won't have teens driving anymore. But what does that look like from a safety standard? At some point, we might even have flying vehicles. What does that need to look like from a safety standard? So, none of this is business as usual. None of this has happened before. And so as safety leaders, we have to think about not what it's always looked like, but what is it going to look like? And how do we define safety in the age of what it is going to look like? We can't and shouldn't apply old safety standards to new technology. right? It would have been crazy to pass car seat laws that said that self-drive, crazy booster seat with the car seat was part of the law that was okay for kids, right? That would have been insane. It would never have made sense to create safety belt laws that said, lap belts are okay when there was the 3-point model that was safer. So we can't continue to think about the laws in the vein of what used to be, but we have to think about safety rules and safety programs and safety initiatives in the light of what is and what is coming. Scooters and autonomous vehicles are going to require safety standards that might not exist yet. But how do we start thinking about that now, and how do we have the courage to think about that now and to start having that that communication and that education? Similarly in student transportation, it may not make sense anymore to apply traditional school bus laws or traditional school bus driver training laws when you have a solution where there is real-time monitoring of what is going on in that vehicle. And it may make sense to rethink what safety means and think about regulations around monitoring driver behavior to prevent distracted driving, for example. It's one thing to say, oh, school buses shouldn't have phones in them. Have you ever driven next to a school bus going down the highway where the driver is texting? Like I have, right? So you can say that, but maybe we should think about how to, create some safety rules and some safety regulation around actually monitoring it, because we know that it's going to happen. And so, I think about, we just spent a lot of time looking at the old car seats and kind of laughing and being a little bit shocked at what they looked like, right? And I think about, what are our children going to look back on when they look back on today? Are they going to laugh at the primitive images of cars that actually had people driving them? Are they going to look back at the primitive images of scooters that exist today? Are they going to make jokes about the simplistic car seats that we made them use today? Because God only knows what the car seats of tomorrow are going to look like. What are they going to think about the safety standards that we're developing and putting in place right now? Like car seats and seatbelts, are they going to shake their heads at how long it took from the time innovations happened to the time it took for the right legislation and regulation to get passed? Or are they going to say that the safety leaders of our time really embraced this innovation and this change? Are they going to say that we had the courage and the conviction to take risks and apply safety innovation in a way that was future forward? Or are they going to say it took way too long because we kept looking backwards and applying business as usual standards? Innovation is only going to move us forward. And so together, let's have the courage to move safety forward too. Thank you.